is what we call
hater shit.
There is no better term.
I wonder if she ever met this. It says, sponsors, we are still $35 short of the $100 goal.
Good morning. Same thing, different week. I've been telling you guys that I've been really leaning into God for this because it doesn't make sense when we're speaking in regards to terms of the United States Constitution and the laws and the policies that we live by. There are so many questions that I have regarding this entire situation. So, special prayer to God that resolution is on the horizon for me and my family, and for you and yours if you guys are dealing with anything. We're still 35 down from the goal, sponsors, just so you guys know.
Just so you know. Oh my gosh, I cannot. It's a picture of a little kid saying, Mom, what is the meaning of life? And the mom says, you are. Have you ever heard actions speak louder than words? I don't know if anyone's ever told you that. But actions do speak much louder than words. Vent to God. He won't repeat it or use it against you. It is very pretty, but something about me, I don't really appreciate her taking a picture of it. The photos in my phones have been photoshopped for 5 years without my permission and have been used in a number of malicious ways. I have reported this to law enforcement very large number of times. I, like many others, am my own biggest critic as well as my own biggest fan. I am not your advisory. My backup breast pump came in. I'm going to compare with my main pump at Medela US Pump and Style on my YouTube channel. Oh my gosh. She said 1 year ago and the months following, we pushed 200 to 300 pounds carts all around the city of Chicago, 60-mile round trips back and forth to spend time with and bring food and little gifts to my babies. Xavier and I are the most in shape people in real life, so I have to wonder. What? No, y'all are not.
Hi guys. So we are still 35 down from the $100 goal. I think I might be getting a sinus infection. How are you?
3:02 in the morning, pumping and watching National Geographic. Sponsors. I'm increasing the goal to $500 cash for the month of June. What? Sponsors, I'm increasing the goal to $500 cash for the month of June. Well, damn. My goal's $1,000 this month. I will be accepting donations via Cash App to the account, and it's her new Cash App account. That is so crazy. She's like, well, since y'all didn't meet the first goal, now it's $500. Try me, bitch. What do you need $500 for? What you training for? Saturday, 8:50 a.m., June 1st, 2024. Heart this post if you have been following my story since 2017.
So for anyone who has not been here since the very, very beginning, which is about 2017, the original Coco Chanel YSL account I created in 2017. And that was my first account, Heather Gillespie, the personal training account that I just rebranded. I was doing marketing for myself as a personal trainer. And when I kind of switched my marketing into content sales, I just used the same account. That account was disabled in 2018 or 19. And then I needed to create a whole new account, which is the One Heather GEE. If you guys have been here since those two accounts, send me a bunch of hearts on this post. If you have been following since the Coco Chanel and One Heather GEE, the days of the reality TV show, please send some love on this post.
No.
Good morning, guys. Happy first of the month. It's the first of the month. Wake up, wake up, wake up. So I was just having a conversation with someone who has the luxury, when they speak about luxury of not knowing, privilege of not understanding, this is what they mean. Your shoulders of understanding what it means to be excited for the first of the month. That's privilege, and you have to be very grateful to have it. Traditionally, and this is not the way it is anymore, and I myself do not get welfare. Welfare is very difficult to get nowadays in 2024. Welfare is supposed to be for anyone who is poor. But the truth of the matter is you cannot get welfare, which is referred to now as TANF, T-A-N-F, Emergency Cash Assistance. You cannot get that in this country unless you are pregnant or have minor children in your permanent custody.
That's why she's mad.
And there's a lifetime limit of up to 5 years that you can accept it, and it's only about $400 to $600 a month on average.
That's good.
That you receive, which is not, any way of life, to be honest.
It's better than nothing, Heather. Get a job.
Accepting that amount of welfare is like saying, I can survive. Anything under that amount annually, you're not living.
Then get a job.
You require more than just using the restroom, eating, and sleeping to be truly living. The freedom that comes with financial stability is really the only true definition of freedom. You don't have any freedom. You're not living. You're alive, but you're not living if you don't at the very least have, $500, $1,000 a month per person in your family. But if you receive, traditionally, Bone Thugs and Harmony made that song First of the Month. Several other artists from, who are culturally inept or in tune with the culture understand that on the first of the month, everyone used to get their checks, whether they were disability, whether they were welfare, whatever. So everyone would be like, and all of your bills are due, your rent is due, et cetera, and so forth. So people would be super excited about the first of the month for that reason. And I was just talking to someone who, myself personally, I've been affected by this. My family has been affected by this. And this is why it's such an important topic for me. I started off in 2019 reporting a bunch of issues, systemic issues. And by systemic, when I use the term for context in this conversation, when I use the term systemic, I'm referring to the local authority, their authorities. So that would be like the state level authorities, states attorneys, judges, court system. And then above that, it would be, I really don't even know who it would be, but I began in 2019 being victimized in ways I had never been victimized before. I was stabbed. Never had I ever even been in a fist fight, so that was new. My apartment was intentionally flooded on a number of occasions, at least 2 that we know of on purpose. My house was broken into and vandalized. My vehicle was destroyed while being parked in a gated community. It was scratched and defaced. And I would call law enforcement for help, which is your authority right above, civilians, is law enforcement. And I would call law enforcement and I would say to them, I need to file a report. And I would go to the station and I would file a report, or if I was the victim in the case, they would show up and say, and they'd fill out the report at the scene of the crime or whatever had occurred. And that was it. The ball was kind of just dropped, so I never received any resolution. Well, I kept on calling and calling and calling and calling and calling. I would say no less than several hundred times.
Dude, she is spiraling again. She's spiraling bad. Like, the more she talks about this crazy nonsense, and you better not talk about Tupac again. I see you, Dion.
Calling and calling and calling and calling. I would say no less than several hundred times each year, beginning in 2019, that these things were occurring. And I would get nowhere. it would be like, well, someone will call you back. Well, Detective so-and-so was, it was Detective Rojas from Lombard Police that was assigned. Never heard anything back from that person. It was Detective James Cleese that was assigned from Chicago. Never heard anything back from that person after the first few months we were working together. And then one day, I just kept sending email updates from that person. It was Detective James Cleese that was assigned from Chicago. Never heard anything back from that person after the first few months we were working together. And then one day, I just kept sending email updates under the impression that he would check them eventually, and he would be able to put it all together eventually. Well, come to find out, one day about 3-4 months ago, I received a return email that says, your mail cannot be delivered. This mailbox is overflowing and full. Who has email here? Everyone? How likely is it that an email box can be full? I have numerous email boxes, some of them in the 6-digit number of incoming mails.
Girl, she didn't get out of bed today.
Or at least 5. I know my original Yahoo account. Who had Yahoo? Yeah. Everyone remember Yahoo?
I still
back in
Yahoo.
The 90s or the 80s. I mean the early 2000s. Girl. I created a Yahoo. Not the 80s, not the 90s. I shouldn't age myself that much. I had my first email account in 2000s, but that was my first email address, a Yahoo account. H Gillespie 87 at yahoo.com. That was my very first email account that I still have to this day. But I'm into the 50,000, 60,000, even 100,000, I believe, emails in that account, and no one ever receives that delivery demon mail not delivered that it sends sometimes. No one. I've never received one of those when I'm forwarding myself something to that email address from another one of my email addresses. So to think that a government server, like one that a Chicago police officer or detective would have, would come back with a notice that says undeliverable, this mailbox is full. That is crazy, right? That doesn't even seem like that's out of my scope of knowledge, and because it doesn't seem real, because I know what email looks like. I have several email addresses, as do most people, and it's just pretty much common knowledge for my demographic that you as an officer especially would not reach that full notice. Not very easily anyways. So it leads you to make another inference, which is either A, there's something very corrupt going on with the police inbox and servers, or B, someone is intentionally marking those emails as undeliverable. Or C, the Chicago police are drowning in communications and interactions and they just can't keep up. So there are several options that my mind, uses, but given that I have these contacts in all of these jurisdictions and areas, and that I've been consistently reaching out to them since about 2019 with very little resolution, almost zero resolution to any of the things that I've reported, it brings your mind to another space. So you logically start trying to make sense of what is going on. And when you can't make sense of what's going on because every logical possible explanation doesn't work, you start thinking of other explanations that at very first glance would not even seem appropriate, would not even seem plausible or very likely. But once you've eliminated all of the likely causes, you have to start thinking of unlikely causes, right? Oh, pardon me. Excuse me. I have a terrible sinus infection. But anyways, so I guess my main point in this conversation is to discuss that my eyes began opening to these issues and situations that mostly affect people living in poverty. And I've stood by this for the longest time. Do I believe that a white person living in poverty, a black person living in poverty, and a Hispanic person living in poverty are treated the same way? It depends.
Pretty much.
Do I believe that their treatment is based on race? No, I do not. I believe their treatment is based on a number of other factors, and race is really not even high on the list for my demographic. I believe that people are going to be judged for their appearance physically. Are they clean? Is their hair kept, neatly? Do they have an odor? Do they smell good or bad? Are their communication skills? Are they able to articulate and communicate appropriately? I believe that people are judged in those ways a lot more than they're judged by race. But I am also aware of, and this is what when we discuss in AI neurological networks, this is exactly what we're talking about. When AI is trying to create a neurological network, it doesn't need to just take in the information of judgment based on one specific perception, odor or aroma, race, age. It needs to take in all of these various perceptions. And let me give a few examples. Race, level of education, social economics, background and upbringing of generational background and upbringing, geographic location, climate, influences, access to technology, access to education, experience, and these are just to name a few off the very top of my head. This list goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on, because what happens then after you answer those first perceptions to create these neurological networks, you then come to another round of questioning that applies to each of those answers. So when you're creating the neurological network for all of those, and then you're even furthermore bringing it to the next level of understanding, which would be like, okay, well, if the person, and these are called, this is something that they discussed in computer programming, Python, Intro to Python. Conditional. So conditional statements. So now you're programming with conditional statements. So you're saying, well, if race is interpreted as this, can you, what's the next interpretation with regards to
What are we talking
if the person
about?
is this race, were they born here in the country, right?
What
Maybe
the
that's
fuck? Are
an
you
example
serious?
of one logical, next set of neural network questions.
Picture internet.
Yes, they were. No, they weren't. You're still going to answer in most of these situations all of the questions that you'd want to answer, regardless of whether they were born here or elsewhere, age, gender, etc., and so forth. But you now have to apply them to each of those possibilities. And so these neural networks become so extensive, they're virtually untrackable to a human mind. I mean, there's no way I can even I'm sure there's a way I can sit down and create one, but we're asking AI, and AI is computing these to scale.
This is so loud.
To scale. And with that understanding, I sit here today, as I do each day, completely baffled as to how we still have people living in poverty.
Because you don't have a
We
job.
are that advanced scientifically
Oh my gosh.
that
Every
we
day.
can create these neural networks and run automations in AI and program self-driving vehicles. And in our minds, let's bypass the conversation of glasses, of lenses that people can wear that will interact with faces around them, biometrics, self-driving vehicles, automated, whatever. But with our minds, with our own neurological networks, foreshadow or, be able to predict these types of connections. Why can't we solve poverty? And the answer is we can. So why haven't we done it? And I don't think that suffering is part of the human condition. And if there are people here who do think that suffering is necessary to the human condition or to success or to the experience, then why not put those people in a group and allow them to suffer?
Mario.
Why not separate them out from the rest of us and allow them to suffer? Because usually the people who say that suffering is a requirement of the human condition or of success, they've mostly never suffered that much, or they mostly don't know what this suffering looks like. they've mostly never gotten it from mud, so to speak. So I don't believe that suffering is part of the human condition, and I don't think that it should be permitted anymore.
Put your finger down.
Now, I'm going to give a very personal and specific example.
Oh, gosh, please don't.
And I'm going to do this because I have faith in AI. I have faith in
Oh,
AI.
Lord. Could you imagine Heather
I have
with
faith
AI?
not only in AI, but I also have faith in virtual policing, in policy, in humanity, in ethics. I have faith in all of these things. So I am going to be forthcoming and use my situation. I come from a family background where my mother, just to give you a small portion of and a little perception, my mother has been working hard her whole life. My mother, when I was a little girl, had a full-time job in a corporate capacity. And then on Sundays, she would work the lunch brunch at a busy restaurant. And my father also worked full-time. And my family, with those three incomes, was just barely able to live a middle-class lifestyle. My sister and there were just two of us in the beginning. There are now three of us. So I have a half brother. My mother had a child with a man who is not my father. After that relationship ended, he is my half brother. I just refer to him as my brother. And then I have my sister. And my family has never been, wealthy to the point of not having to worry about next month's bills this month. We've never been in a position financially where we've been able to say, oh, this year is good. We're good this year. Everything's taken care of this year. We can kind of breathe. We've kind of been like this our whole lives with regards to money. And we've worked really hard, all of us. So I really don't have any lazy members of my family that I know of, anyways.
Besides you?
But I was speaking with, now understand this, my mother got promoted and she got an upper level executive job with a semi-famous brand. I'm not going to say which one.
You already did.
And facilities brand. So I'm not gonna elaborate on that, but she got this chief executive operating officer or chief president, vice president, some sort of, that kind of seniority in her position. And my stepfather, who was a former stockbroker, or he worked for the Stock Exchange of Chicago, the Board of Trade, he was able to begin trading from home at a setup at the house. And my sister and I were out of the house already, or my sister was still there, but I was gone. And he was able to dedicate his adult life to being a father to my little brother. And he always worked little odd jobs and things and did his trading on the side. But
this is
he
interesting.
spent 90% of his awake hours raising my brother. And my mother, who was a full-time employee, she also raised my brother, put a lot of effort into him. My stepfather was always...
Do we think that's where some of the problem lies? Do you think she has some resentment that she didn't have a mom and dad as much as her brother did?
He spent 90% of his awake hours raising my brother. And my mother, who was a full-time employee, she also raised my brother, put a lot of effort into him. My stepfather was always, just right there with him. He was doing every sport that they make. My stepfather was the coach with him, so it wasn't just like they were those parents in the stand. They were the parents on the field and in the stand, for my brother. That wasn't the way it was with me when I was a little girl. I got very, very limited access to my mother and my father as well. I was pretty much by myself from age 14 all the way until now.
Daddy issues.
So,
and mommy issues.
Which is another conversation. But imagine this. My brother, he was able to have a father who was hands-on with him, who was able to pick him up and drop him off at school every day, who was able to participate in sports with him, who was able to be in the home when he was home. And then he also had my mother, who would get off work and go home. They would take vacations together regularly, and he had a very supportive home life, almost like that of an only child, but with the luxury of having two older siblings out of the house who he, could, I really don't know what benefit my sister has brought to my brother, but I know that having siblings from personal experience, it does feel better than feeling like an only child. And he had the only child part of it without being an only child, you know? So he was raised kind of like an only child, and he has his struggles too. We all do.
Why
But
are
for
we
the purpose
talking
of
about
this
your brother?
conversation and perception, understand this. He had my stepfather's attention, and he had my mother's attention and energy and investment of those two things.
That's
Now,
good. I'm
my
sorry
daughter,
for your loss.
okay, so I was out of the house at 14, 15 years old. And I graduated high school early, 17 and a half years old. And I still had a relationship with my family. Every holiday we were together. Birthdays we were together. I had my own place at 17 years old. Graduated high school at 17 years old. Started college immediately. As a matter of fact, I believe I was taking college credit courses in high school through Naperville, possibly. But I never stopped working and working hard.
Good gosh, things
life.
get out quick.
Had my first job at 15 or 14 years old with a work permit because I was so young that I could not work without one. And so you consider the fact that my brother, not by chance, not by surprise, was able to get into college. And I'm very, very proud of him. My brother has put in a tremendous amount of work. My daughter is always in my care with her brother and sister, and now I have a fourth child. But my daughter's life looks like this. The paradigm is this. She was with me, okay, and I was separated from her father. She was with me, her brother, and her sister in our home. I was a single income parent, and I was not earning what my mother was earning as.
Why are you talking about your?
Now
you're talking about your kids.
I was earning most of the time a little above minimum wage, and I was a medical administrator at Northwestern Hospital, as well as several private physicians' offices in Alexian Brothers in Northern Illinois. I worked for Dr. Parag Doshi, Dr. Smith, Dr. Aronson, Dr. Carly Scammer, Dr. Lynn Maletti, Dr. Susan Berg, Dr. Walter Stoller, and many, many other doctors. Okay, Dr. Najum, Dr. Lewis, eye doctors doing optical sales. But I was a single income household most of that time, and I never collected child support because my belief system was the kids are with me 4 or 5 days a week. They're with you 3 or 4 days a week. You buy the clothes they need at your house. You buy the food they need at your house. You take them to do activities while they're with you, and I'll do the same while they're with me. That was close enough to 50% as it gets, in my opinion. We'll split school supplies. We'll split, all of those things. So my children got me and my attention, whatever I could give, after I got off of work from giving a company 11 to 14 hours of my time and energy in exchange for approximately $19 to $20 an hour, which in early 2006 and 5 and 4 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 was substantial. It was about double the minimum wage in those years. Now, can you imagine what type of energy and attention I would be, the quality of the energy and attention that I would be able to provide to my children when I would get home from work at the end of the day? Not the same, probably, as my stepfather was able to give my brother when he would go pick up my brother from school and take him to sports or do things of this nature. Also different than my mother would be able to give to my brother when she would get out of a 12-day work day or 12-hour work day or 14-hour work day or just get home from a 5-day business trip, right? So being that my brother had the privilege of having 2 parents in the household who were able to give him varying degrees of time, attention, and effort each day, and my daughter and my children were only able to get...
I'm sorry, but did you just say he was privileged because he had a mother and a father in the household? That's not what privilege means. Are you kidding me? He's blessed to have his parents. That's how it's supposed to be. What the fuck? Privileged? Miss me with that bullshit.
So, being that my brother had the privilege of having 2 parents in the household who were able to give him varying degrees of time, attention, and effort each day, and my daughter and my children were only able to get a smaller percentage of my time, energy, effort, and attention based on whatever I could give after my day of work, it is no surprise that when one of my children, specifically math has been proven to be a problem, is struggling with this topic, with this course, and considering colleges and things of that nature, that's not even in the immediate forefront of our conversation. What college do you want to apply to? We're thinking, how are we going to get through math this semester?
Well, duh.
And my children are exposed to problems like legal struggles, poverty struggles, i.e. shutoffs on electric, the threat of having, our security system in our home shut off, shut-offs with cable, shut-offs with phone bills, shut-offs with water, shut-offs with, and granted, I was one of those parents who, while my children lived with me full-time, 90% of the time, I didn't have those issues. They were threats because it was very possible that they could happen at any time, and they did happen once or twice at least. But 90% of the time, I was, grateful enough to be able to keep all those things on. Understand that I'm using my situation, my family, and my loved ones to paint a vivid picture of America for those of you who have the privilege of not understanding.
I'm sure your family doesn't want that, though.
And I'm at the top of a long descending demographic of people living in poverty.
Okay.
Who have become so accustomed to not knowing if their electric will be paid the next month, don't even consider it a source of anxiety or a point of anxiety anymore. I never got there, luckily. For me, it was a source of anxiety, and my bills remain a source of anxiety every month. But there are people who are living in such poverty that not paying their bill doesn't even bother them anymore. It's not that it doesn't bother them, it's that their bodies, as a naturally evolving body, and their minds that naturally evolved to protect ourselves, have gotten to the point where they can't freak out about it anymore because the negative and traumatic everlasting effects of that stress, their bodies create natural coping mechanisms to just not care. And it appears to you or I, outwardly without the information that I'm presenting, that they don't care and that they're careless. But that's not at all the truth. The truth is, of course they want to have their electric on. Of course they want to be living with necessities that you and I take for granted each day. Of course they want to be able to choose their own meals and cook for themselves. Of course they want to get in their car rather than board the bus. Of course. But for someone who's never known that struggle, for someone whose body, mind, and soul is not evolved to the point where they are protected from those anxieties because it's become expected to not have, there's a lot of judgment from the people who haven't developed that form of protection. So there is no surprise about the struggles that a child who only has a small amount of energy, time. I'm not going to say love because my children have always gotten all of my love. There's no doubt in their minds that I love them. But as a child of a father and mother who could not financially provide to me, and I'll get more to that as well, because of their other obligations and where their money was going, I know how it feels. The correlation between not having finance from your parents when you need it and knowing they love you, they overlap, whether we want them to or not. So in my calm mind, I know my parents love me, and I know that if they could, they would. But knowing that they can't, and so they don't, it does affect us. And I'm not so naive to think that my perspective is unique.
I know for a fact that
my children, of course, have gotten frustrated if they've needed money from me and I've not been able to give it to them. In their calm, rational mind, do they know mom loves them? Yeah. But then that stems a whole million other questions as to why us? Why couldn't we be born to a parent with money?
I'm so sorry.
Why does my mom have to go through this? And it's not one way in perspective. It's not poor me. It's poor my mom. It's poor my family. It's poor me, poor my mom, poor my family. And then once you evolve past that mindset, it's we're fine. And then you harden. And this is the natural progression of living in poverty, living in lack. And so I continue to pose, the perspective that when we're sitting around blaming, and I believe that it is a tremendous amount of the middle class. Rich people, I'm pretty sure, don't live in privilege. Rich people know the struggles that poor people face. I believe that they do because a lot of them, have lived that. But the middle class is in a tremendous amount of ignorant bliss and have lived that. But the middle class is in a tremendous amount of ignorant bliss.
You're so fucking stupid.
The trade-off for that is that they work really hard and their realities of financial success, they're very different than the realities of the other two classes, those living in poverty and those who are wealthy.
We're the best. Skip it.
There's a tremendous amount of responsibility that's shouldered on the middle class that they don't even know they carry, and some that they do know they carry. And at the end of the day, all of these neural networks and all of these augmented realities and tools that we have, they're only as effective as we allow them to be. If we're not putting forth effort into solving the right problems, then the right problems cannot be solved. So when I say things like universal income, or at the very least universal basic income, my idea for resolving all the problems of the world is that we have no limits on ATM withdrawals, and they all come from one bank. One bank. All of the money is housed in one central facility, and it's digital. It's not dollar paper money. And when you need money for something, you go to the ATM and you request that amount of money, and that money is given to you instantly. And you go and make your purchase for whatever it is you need. And when we train people to live this way, they will not hoard. They will not purchase in excess because they will understand that whatever it is they need, they can obtain. By forcing people to live in poverty where they can't get what they need, they cannot reach their needs.
That is ridiculous.
By forcing people to live in poverty where they can't get what they need, they cannot reach their needs, we're not making the best use, in my opinion, as someone who has lived in this extreme poverty. We're not making the best use of these advancements and technological knowledge that we have. No one, in my opinion, should have to live in poverty. No one's children should have to suffer. No one. So I think it's really a worthwhile discussion to take away control from these kids who think that they're doing, I'm going to refer to it, for lack of better wording, as clinical research. If your clinical research is being conducted in a way that is harming your subject, that is more harmful and destructive to your subject than it is anything else, then you need to find another way. We stopped and we protested and we did all of this with regards to testing on animals and with regards to ethical and cruelty-free things for makeup production and things of that nature. So if we can put forth such an effort in not allowing makeup to be tested on animals, then I believe we need to, at the very least, put forth the same amount of effort and attention into prevention of testing on human subjects. And clinical studies should be, completed in a way that does not interfere with outcome. When we're talking about clinical studies being conducted that change the path of a person's entire life, that is not a natural outcome. That is not a clinical study. That is a manipulation of reality. Now, I also understand that if you zoom out your lens a little bit more and you're a believer of the butterfly effect or everything that's supposed to happen happens, where there are no coincidences, philosophies like that are much broader and more philosophical than they are, physics centered, that you might think, well, it was supposed to happen that way. The clinical interference was leading them to their intended, outcome. But with all this, in mind and all this being said, we live in 2024. We carry one or more electronic devices with us at all times. Most of us. It should be all of us, or have access to. No one should be living in a depressed state. There's no one. This is not a matter of opinion. This is a matter of fact. We have the ability to give every single person enough without running out. So what is the problem? And then it leads your mind to, okay, if we're talking about having enough for all, but we're doing things to not allow all to have enough, who and why is doing that? And when there is no direct communication, or there is no one person, I have all these questions and I can't pick up the phone and say, I know exactly who to call for this. Boop, 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 boop. Yes, I'd like to know why the American people are not receiving universal basic income. You ponder, and most certainly that pondering grows incredibly intense and incredibly deep when you're seeing people who you know and love being affected by the lack of action. I do believe that that's the reason why it's been able to go on for so long, because the world traditionally prior to these advancements in communication and technology have been so separated. Segregation was not just a thing based on race. It was very much a thing based off of socioeconomic class. You wouldn't see a person who was worth a couple billion at the same grocery store that you would see, a poor person begging outside for change. There was intentional segregation of those classes. And there still is now more than ever. But communication and technology has given us a platform to reach the unreachable, to be heard by those who traditionally would be protected from hearing from us. So how do I reach who I need to reach so that I can say, hey, here are my skills. These are my skill sets. This is what I value them at. How do I get an ROI for everything that I've invested in my journey, specifically for the purpose of creating a fruitful, stable, loving, supportive environment in life for my children and for yours? If you do believe in those butterfly effects and things of that nature, you understand most certainly that as we procreate, the life that we're leaving for our generation's offspring is completely contingent upon our efforts, both individually and as a collective as a whole. I go to church on Sundays and I pray to God every single Sunday, and most of the days during the week, please God, please put me in a position me to have a home, a physical home. Yes, I have theoretical custody of my children. In the eyes of the law, on pieces of paper, I am the custodial parent. But if I'm living in poverty and I cannot provide for my children, I cannot have physical custody of them. I cannot hold them. I cannot, yes, I have theoretical custody of my children. In the eyes of the law, on pieces of paper, I am the custodial parent. But if I'm living in poverty and I cannot provide for my children, I cannot have physical custody of them. I cannot hold them. I cannot, kiss them. I cannot hug them.
So get a job.
I ask God over and over in the mindset of abundance and in the mindset of there are no limits on what we can earn and what we can create and what we can do and the things we can experience and the things we can provide for each other and for our children and for our offspring. Having that mindset that I have, how do I turn that into something practical that is profitable so that I can, for myself, live in freedom and have the freedom to make a purchase, real estate, for example, or a vehicle, even something as basic as like a timeshare, so that I can have a safe place that is mine for that period of time to be with my children in that space. That space is what I am craving, whether it is, as I said, a rental or something that I own. That space. And then once you get that space, let's create the neural network for it. So first thing is you need the space. Then once you have the space, what else do you need to create an environment that's nurturing and loving? And you need energy. You need the energy to do so. You can't be so overworked and exhausted that you don't have the energy and patience that you need to be there, to really show up. You need money. You need money so that you can do things other than just sitting in a circle staring at each other, right? And having surface level conversation or even deep conversation. There's only so much of that you can do before your energy depletes, right? So when we're constantly pouring out of the bucket of resources, we need something to fill it back up. And my question continues and it remains, it always has been, following all of these steps that I've taken, and there's this invisible, force field around me that's not allowing me to get through it. What do I have to do to break that force field down so that I can give myself and my children that space, that opportunity, that lifestyle that we all seek, that stability that we all crave, the love, the happiness, the things of those nature. And the last thing I'm going to say before I hop off of here for now is that, if we don't do something about this now, it's intentional, because maybe before the excuse remained that it was very boxed in and hush hush, and in the olden days, the newspaper was the primary form of communication. So it would be realistic to say that a whole entire environment that grows up in the Midwest has no idea what's going on in the South, right?
Okay.
Especially in the days before phones. How would you hear? It was still possible to find out, but it would have to be like, oh, my cousin went down south and she's coming back next week and she's going to tell me. And the news she would deliver would be from her limited scope of perspective and reality from what she saw and experienced on that trip down south. The internet allows us to say what is going on in Texas from Chicago on Texas news, and then you can get a plethora of major media outlets, your standard 579, Fox, NBC, ABC, NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, what else? WGN. They have those everywhere pretty much, right? You could get those, and then you could take it a step further, and you could go on your social media and say 60611, zip code, enter, and you could get people and their individual perspectives from that area. So now you've got reputable sources at your fingertips within less than a second. From those places, from the news places, those are all reputable. Oh, my daughter's calling. I'll have to finish this later. From those places, from the news places, those are all reputable. Oh, my daughter's calling. I'll have to finish this later. Hi, babe. Alexis? Hello?
Why didn't she just end the live? I thought.